Hello, and welcome back to the Write Your Path podcast. I'm your host, Solly Spindler, a writer, editor, book doula, and writing coach. And today we have my friend Caro Griffin on. Caro is a very incredible, badass business lady who has been in the tech field, and now she has pivoted into the world of agave spirits, especially mezcal. So I wanted to have Caro on today to talk about what it's like being a female in male-dominated industries. So if you would like to just walk us through kind of your professional pathway, how you ended up where you ended up.
Yeah, I can do that. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here.
So I started my career in tech very much on like the technical side as a programmer. I taught myself coding when I was a kid and kind of used that to push my way through college. And then when I graduated with a degree in interdisciplinary arts, it was like, yeah, you're
very
going to use...
tech related.
Yeah, you're going to use those tech skills to make money. And so kind of accidentally ended up in the tech industry and eventually kind of pivoted more into operations, finance, kind of the administration of businesses, working on the business and in the business, and realizing that common thread that I really loved was problem solving. And that's what I loved about coding. And that's what I liked about kind of running a business. So every day was different. And, got to work with a lot of cool people and do a lot of cool things. But at one point in the last couple of years, I just got really burnt out. And so I took a sabbatical and was really trying to figure out, what do I want to do? And there was no world in which I didn't think I'd go back to tech. And I still haven't ruled it out completely, but because part of me does miss like the business running. But ultimately what I thought was just kind of this like sabbatical hobby of chasing this passion for agave spirits. I'd been interested in them for the last couple of years. And so I got my mezcal sommelier certification. I started hosting like cocktail pop-ups, started a podcast around spirits, and it just kind of grew from there. And now I'm like, there is some overlap between really like hospitality and community and the type of tech businesses I worked for, but it's definitely a big pivot. Yeah. And as you said, definitely industries that, male dominated. Yeah, for sure. We'll just leave it at that for now.
So when did you basically start your journey in the tech world? What year was that around?
I guess it depends what you consider. Like I taught myself to code when I was like 12, and built my first website shortly thereafter. And then, I graduated from college 13 years ago now. And that was really when I got my first quote unquote tech job. And, did that for about 10 years, before I took my sabbatical.
And what was it like for you being a queer female in the tech industry? I should paint the picture here. Cara and I are both queer gringas in Mexico City, and we both have very vibrantly colored hair. Cara's hair is purple and mine is blue, so
we're two of a kind, yeah. It was both. Interesting is always the word that comes up. It was good and bad, right? There were definitely some moments where you're just like, ugh, fuck you guys, But overwhelmingly good. And I think part of that was I worked in the tech industry, but surrounded myself with women in the tech industry. And so very much from the beginning sought out meetups and conferences that were very geared towards women in tech, especially when I was in kind of the programming side of it. There was some of that oh, surely you're on the marketing side, you're in sales, you're in HR, and I was like, fuck you, I can code just as, maybe not just as well. I was never my great strength. I was self-taught and, my skills were always a little whatever, but because it was never my passion. But I was like, no, fuck you for assuming that I'm not technical just because I'm a woman. Right. I think there's maybe a little bit less of that now. But it's still very much male dominated, obviously. And so I do count myself very lucky that kind of the two companies I worked for the longest were not only primarily female driven teams, but they were women-led teams. They were women-founded teams. And the companies themselves, the mission was really centered around teaching women to code in the first case, and then building a community of women in tech and supporting them getting jobs and upskilling. And so it was I had carved out this little corner for myself. That. And so in that corner is where I spent 90% of my time, and it was lovely.
Oh, that's great.
And then there were those times where, especially once I got more on the founder side, it was the same. It was once I got to a senior enough founder level, it was going back to being a programmer, where I suddenly was when I went to those founder meetings, it was being in a developer meetup. It was like, oh, are you like the founder's girlfriend? Are you the personal assistant? Are you the chief of staff?
Oh my God, did somebody ask you that?
Oh, plenty of times. And like in some of these spaces were these spaces that I would consider to be very inclusive and forward thinking and whatever. And sometimes it wasn't that direct, but it was just in the conversation, it would be kind of implied of like, oh, who are you here with? You know, or like, who are you working for? And it was really a shock in a couple of those, because I was like, wait, I sought out this particular group because I thought it was going to be different. And then, you know, always very gracious about it and like, oh, great, you know, and so it was like the minimum, but there was always that minimum, you know, when I like stepped out of my corner.
Oh my God, how did you not like backhand everyone? I would have just been like, whoosh.
I mean, there were definitely times when, it wasn't so innocent and just did feel really gross, where I was like, I, you know, maybe didn't say fuck you, but I was a little bit more of like a bitch about it, rightly so in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, to some degree, it was just like part of it. And I think those people were so much easier to deal with than when you deal with like it in like your everyday duties.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I, through a series of events, like ended up on a primarily women run and like a team full of women, with like as part of a company that was, the whole leadership was like older white men. And that was the first time where I really felt that friction that I think most women in tech faced every day. Yeah. Where it was like, and I was in a very senior leadership role, and it was like, it was just constant Monday morning quarterbacking, you know, and like, and things where I didn't feel like I went from basically being on like an all women leadership team. Yeah. Where I could get really worked up and sometimes like start to tear up and be like, I'm just really frustrated and I just need to let this out. Yeah. And they would be like, yeah, absolutely. Do what you got to do. Like, we're not going to hold it against you. To being in a meeting where I had to decide whether or not I was going to call out, like, that's a total microaggression and I need you to stop making that assumption. You know, like I was once on a call where I had this particular role where there was basically 5 of us and I was the only woman. And we had been presenting this like annual plan that I'd prepared for like weeks and spent a lot of time on. And some asshole kept DMing me in the Zoom chat of like, your mic is brushing, your mic is loud, mute yourself while I was presenting. And then afterwards I was like, and it totally threw me off. Yeah, because you're like
trying to pay attention to what you need to say.
Really threw me off. I'm doing this big presentation. I was so angry. And then afterwards I was like, I was presenting. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he was like, oh, LOL, my bad. I thought it was just like your mic, because my mic was brushing against my shirt and he didn't realize that I was the one presenting. So he thought I was just unmuted. And I was like, cool, my mic was brushing up against the shirt, like my bad. But like, I'm the only woman on this call and I am presenting.
It's like, did you not see the names?
Also,
like,
you have met me. Like,
oh my God, what?
I was just like, I'm the only woman on this call. How do you not realize that I'm the one presenting right now? Ugh, like, God. Just some things like that where I was, and it was one of those things where I was like, that was infuriating and so like uncalled for and uncool. But it was like one of those things where if I had brought that up to leadership, I would have felt like they would have acted like I was making a big deal out of nothing. It was an honest mistake. Yeah. But it's like, how many honest mistakes can you put up with?
I don't know if they would be called honest.
Yeah. Right? And it's like, oh my God. And I just remember being at an all-team retreat and someone talking about like, they were talking about company values and they wanted them to be assume good intent. And I was like, okay, but like, we need to also talk about how like, that's not, I was like and I was like, no one here has done the work to realize like the problematicness in that statement, where on the surface, that sounds good. Like assume good intent. If we're all coming from the same place and the same background, we can assume good intent, but like you have to take responsibility for the harm that you do regardless of your intent. And I was like,
can we amend this to be like, recognize your privilege, assume good intent? Yeah. Like there needs to be a part A to this.
Yeah. And I was like, and it was one of those things where it's like, I like to think that I've, done a decent amount of work and I knew inherently that this was bad, but also it like put me on the spot to be like, wait, how do I explain this in a short, succinct, non-defensive way to a bunch of like, and I remember explaining it to this one finance dude who was probably in his early 50s, and to his credit was like, oh, I'd never thought about that. Okay, Yeah. But it was like, this is also a dude who didn't realize that like you shouldn't just always ask the woman in the room to take notes. And when I brought that up, he was God. He was like, oh, you're right. I'll be more intentional about who I asked to take notes, And I was just like,
dear sweet baby Jesus.
And it was like, again, like one of those, like, as soon as I pointed it out, it was fine. But also like having to constantly point it out, and some people were like, "Oh, Caro," I know that they were like, the piece.
You're like, I don't want to do this either.
Yeah.
Like, it takes a lot of my emotional labor to have to like do this work for you. Like, there's this thing called Google where you can educate yourself. That's not my job.
Yeah. But not having the space to be like, go Google this, why you shouldn't have just assume good intent, period. You know?
Yeah. Be like no, I would just like use ChatGPT and ask them that question. Yeah. And see what it says.
Exactly. And I've spent so much time supporting women in tech in my full-time roles, and like I've heard so many crazy stories and ridiculousness, and you know, knew it existed, but that was the first time that I felt like, oh yeah, no, I've really, like, again, I like knew dodged a bullet for the majority. I knew the privilege of working so like primarily with women, but that like really put it into context of like, okay, no, this is no longer negotiable for me. Like, I need a team that's like 50-50, if not primarily women. Or like, I really need to vet the dudes on this team. You know, because again, a lot of them, they are perfectly nice guys. Like, you know, enjoyed them as people, but like, it was just a lot of that education, and like, it just felt like a lot of friction. You know, and that's not good for me or for them on a day-to-day basis, and it's not good for the business. No. Right? Like, it slows you down. And so it's like I recognized that I was also slowing everything down by not just going along with it, but also I wasn't willing to go along with it. I know. You're like, my time is very valuable. You could be using me in much better ways, but because you haven't dealt with this issue with your staff and your employees, now I have to deal with it before I get back to doing the actual thing you hired me for. And this, I will say, is every woman of color in tech who is recruited, especially technical ones, who are recruited to lead diversity initiatives, to give feedback, to be on hiring panels, to show that they have a Black woman on the team in a technical role, and then those things aren't taken into account in their promotion cycles. Only their technical work is. And so it's like you're actively harming their career. Not only are you asking them to do this unpaid labor, basically, but I think people are like, oh, they are getting paid. It's their full-time job. And it's like, yes, but that is not what's in the rubric on whether or not they get promoted or get a raise. And so you're actively holding them back. And so it also, I just want to call that out, because I think that's this extra level that I don't deal with, where this was just something we saw constantly in my last role, where it was just like constantly supporting these women who are like, yeah, I want to mentor the other women of color on my team or the other women on my team. I want to speak at conferences and be on hiring panels and in these diversity meetings and rewriting policies, but that takes me away from my actual job. Yeah, which is what you're getting. Yeah, and I want to get promoted on, and I want to be a director or a senior engineer or a technical lead, and I can't do that if I'm doing all this non-technical things. Damn. So there's just like, it sounds like there just needs to be space. Like, space needs to be made for these other elements that are so integral to making a workplace, especially in tech, like more integrated, more open, more compassionate. It's like, okay, can we please start including these other spaces into how we, I know it's not necessarily grading our employees, but positioning them but we do, like, these big, any tech company of a certain size is doing a formal performance review cycle, and those aren't always categories, you know, and even when they are, and even when that work is compensated, it's like, okay, and I think I will say I recognize the difficult space that puts like leadership in sometimes, because it's all well and good, and a lot of these people will agree with me on paper, but then the runway gets short. Funding dries up. Yeah. You have KPIs to hit. This is the thing that's going to get cut. Yeah. You know? And like, and I'm, you know, want to be the one to be like, no, you can't cut it. Like, you have to do it when it's hard too, you know? But also, if you have to choose between, you know, allotting budget to this kind of thing or doing layoffs. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I think sometimes people are like, oh, it's hard, so we just won't do it. Ugh, that's so sad and terrible. Yeah. Ugh. And so how was your time at Tech Ladies? What was that experience like? Yeah, so Tech Ladies was, and might still be, the largest community of women in tech. Had been around for like 10 years. I was like the first full-time employee, helped grow it, saw it through an acquisition. And I think that role, we both like had a community like membership side, and then we had a B2B side really, where we helped companies hire women from our community. And there was a lot of education where we really saw ourselves as more than a job board, not only because we had this like candidate database, basically, that people could more proactively source from. But also, like, we didn't let you just post a job without everything had to be reviewed. And then we would take it upon ourselves to be like, hey, yes, absolutely, we'll post these jobs for you because you've paid to post them, but like, can I make these suggestions? You know,
Ooh,
like,
I love that.
if you are asking for this senior engineer, why does it only have 3 years of experience required? It's because you don't want the juniors who are just out of boot camp to apply. They're going to apply anyway. So like, let's stop over titling. Let's stop like title inflation. Do you really need a computer science degree bachelor? Because only 10% of those go to women. So if you say you care about hiring women and then you insist on a computer science degree, your right hand is not talking to your left hand. You can't have both of those things. Like, and it, you know, the same thing of like, we really care about hiring for women, and hiring like a diverse team, but we insist on a CS degree from Stanford. We insist on in office 5 days a week, you know, like, and it's like, we have a shitty parental leave policy. We have no flexibility, you know, it's like, but we're going to give you equity and it's going to work. And it, like, those are not the things. Women are obviously not a monolith, but like trying to coach, like, hey, you do offer some cool things. I've seen your benefits package. Here's how to highlight the ones that are going to, in general, appeal to this community. And so I learned a lot, both from how bigger tech companies that I hadn't personally worked at were hiring, and also like what women were looking for on job descriptions, and that they just like, we just look at a job posting differently than men do. There's a really common stat that like, and God, I've been out of it too long. I can't remember it exactly. I used to quote it like every day. It was like, basically, women in general will only apply for a role. If they need like 90%, and men will apply at like 40%.
I do. I get that stat a lot too.
And there's a lot of exceptions there, especially like women coming out of boot camps are coached to just apply for everything. But the problem with that is that then hiring managers start crafting their job descriptions to avoid those candidates because they don't want to sift through it.
Oh, interesting.
And I think hiring managers, I'm going down a tangent here, but like hiring managers have to stop creating job descriptions that are filters. Like, you got to create the filter on the back end. The job description is a sales piece. It's a marketing tool. And your actual application needs to have some drop-down menus and some multiple choice questions that you can then use to filter it. Because putting this long Christmas list of, like, wish list attributes, it's keeping away the good candidates, too.
100%.
You know, who could really do the job and really excel. If you just like thought a little bit more creatively about like the background that person could have.
And it's like a romantic relationship. You're never going to get 100% of what you want.
100%.
So like you need to make sure you have some wiggle room there on like at least 5 to 10%.
Oh my God.
Maybe even more.
Like 90% of the requirements I saw were not actually requirements. And they bend them for people in their networks or people with a great degree or people who worked at Airbnb, but then like they wouldn't put that on the job description, and it's like, then it's not actually a requirement.
Exactly.
You know, like if someone could at all possibly do the job without that thing, it is not a requirement. It's a nice to have.
So our advice is for women to apply for more jobs than they think they're qualified for.
Totally. 100%. I'm like,
because men are already doing it.
Bombard them. It's fine. They should have better better applicant tracking system set up.
And you're still working in tech in like a fractional role, correct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I do take on like freelance operations projects, and I've been thinking a lot about whether I'm going to do more of those in 2026. I would like to, especially in more of like a hospitality or travel space. But because primarily I'm working on some of my own projects. But
it's like a nice to have if you want to dip back in.
Exactly. And so I get to scratch like the business itch a little bit and like the scaling business itch on some of my own stuff. But I'm also so early stage that like, it would be cool to get back in there. I was just talking to a friend who was talking about her business, and I was like, and my brain just immediately started spinning, and I was like, I do miss this. I miss jumping into the weeds and figuring stuff out. Exactly.
And I feel like fractional is, it's like a newer concept. It's not completely new, but how has that experience been like for you? Just like jumping into a client's operations and like figuring stuff out, but not being like a full-time employee.
I feel like a lot of people are drawn to fractional work for the flexibility. Excuse me. But I think it does require this extra skill set of you have to be able to get into a messy situation and figure it out really quickly and determine what's important and what's not and what's on fire and what's just like simmering. And so the analogy I use a lot is it's like you walk up to this like big mountain of mountainous pile of work and you have to like circle it and be like, what's the best entry point? Like immediately.
Yeah.
And then, cause like all startups, to use yet another analogy, are like, it's like a stovetop with 4 burners. 3 of them are boiling over. Like they are already boiling over. 1 is about to, and you have to immediately figure out like with like less than 2 actions, how do you get all of them to stop? You know?
Damn.
And so like you don't get to spend, like if they were hiring like a new head of or director or something of your department, like you get to spend the first 90 days kind of like figuring things out and finding some small wins. But as a fractional person, you get a week.
Damn.
You know, to like really get the majority lay of the land and then maybe another week to kind of suss things out before you like really like make your recommendations. And I think the thing I love about fractional work is I love that part.
Yeah.
I love like wading through the mess and like finding a founder who like doesn't even know what they need. And I'm like,
you're like, I do.
Yes.
I have unearthed this gem for you.
Yes. Like when a founder says, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start. I'm like, yes, that's exactly where I want to be. Like, and they're like, well, I need to like comb through put some docs together for you and create some documentation. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, that's why you hire me is to not do that. And so like, yeah, I love getting in there and I'm like, word vomit. Just start talking at me and I'll start taking notes and we'll figure it out together.
Ooh.
And then also doing like the in the weed stuff. You get to a certain senior level and it's all strategy, and I love strategy, but I also want to do the thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that makes me a little different, is like most, fractional people are focused like on strategy and then like maybe the layer underneath that, which is like tactical planning. But I like want to actually do the thing.
Yeah.
Like put me in the corner running a special project that your regular team doesn't have bandwidth for, and like, cool.
And then I feel like you're more in touch with their workflows and you can easily find more bottlenecks because you're actually doing the work. Whereas if you're just doing strategy or tactical work, you can't actually figure out where the root source of the problem is.
Totally. We've all worked with those like expensive consultants who come in with this like a fancy doc and you're like, cool, we're never going to do any of that because it doesn't live in reality.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And because it was like planned too far out, it's like, no, what's the one thing we're doing now? And some big ideas for what comes next. But like things just change too fast at a startup. Like you can't.
It's like we need to stop the bleeding that we're having now.
Exactly.
Before we can start thinking about our next like goal or metric shit.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so I do love that part and miss it. Just I would like to do it maybe in like a different space, with like in kind of the travel or hospitality or like physical goods, like, beverage or food. I haven't done some of it, but not a lot of it. And that's like the space where I'm like living these days with this kind of.
Yeah.
Also, like, I don't know, career change, career shift.
Yeah.
Talk to me in a year. I'll have different language for it.
Yeah. But then you can, like, marry your 2 passions then.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the hope.
Yeah. So tell us about the second passion. How did this develop? And when did this change start to bubble under the surface until you finally acted on it?
Yeah. When I moved to Mexico, I did a mezcal tasting because that's, like, one of the things you do, right? And was kind of like, oh, okay. It wasn't, like, an immediate love. I was like, oh, cool, like interesting, and then I think over the years just got more and more into it, and really saw how special agave spirits are. They are truly agricultural products in a world where most spirits are industrial ones. They have such a unique history and culture around them and such a variety that I think a lot of people don't get to taste because they just taste like the industrial ones that are like a mouthful of smoke and it's more than smoky tequila, And so I just like followed that passion on sabbatical a little bit more, and got kind of an official certification, but more so started hosting a pop-up bar, primarily because I spoke Spanish, but not fluently. And then also at the time, I had permission to live and work on my own projects here, but I didn't have permission to work for a local business. And so I was like, okay, I can't go work at a bar, so I have to like create my own. And so I started doing pop-ups, and then I started my podcast and some other kind of related, projects. And was like, oh, I love doing this. I love kind of that overlap between, we've both been lucky enough to travel extensively. And I think something I've realized in the last few years is that like you can learn so much about a place by what they drink and where they drink it and who's drinking it. And, and those are the stories I'm really interested in. I love a good museum. I love a good walking tour, but I've learned just as much about places sitting on a bar stool.
Especially the people.
Yeah. 100%. And so, that's just something I'm both that kind of storytelling piece, but then also that hospitality piece. And I think, I've spent most of my tech career working in like community, for lack of a better word. And I think there is this overlap with this hospitality piece that, I was really missing. I think we were all missing post-pandemic. But then I think I realized I'd maybe even been missing it further because of, the nomadic lifestyle I'd had for a while, the remote work that I'd always been doing. And just this like, I think we all feel this like business has become so businessy. And so like customer support has gotten worse. Like,
there's not even a human anymore.
Yeah, and it's just like, they don't care if you write a bad review. They don't care if you never work with them again. Yeah. Like, it's just so frustrating interacting with like so many businesses these days. And I just like missed the community, but also like the hospitality of it, right? Of like serving people and being on the lookout for what they're looking for and how do you make their day better in an unexpected way. Yeah. How do you go above and beyond like this like good, better, best idea. Yeah. And so that, I think it's kind of that overlap for me that I'm like trying to live in the moment.
And having that like in-person connection is really special.
Yeah.
And which like, I feel like even after running a digital business for over a decade, I'm like so excited to give in-person workshops now.
100%.
And like be in front of people, talk to them. And I'm like, ooh, this is great. This is like a new aspect of my business that is really fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to be in an office every day because that's not how I'm most productive. Yeah. But I do, there is a time and a place for in-person connection. Yeah. And like, I have this podcast that I'm running about, spirits and travel. And it's like, I go to the place. Yeah. And sometimes I have to do the interviews remotely after the fact, but like, I think it's really important. Like, I want to go to the place. I want to talk to the people. I want to notice things that you can't find virtually. Yeah. Even if that means going to Japan or Scotland or wherever.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about where you've been so far on this journey and the types of people you've met and what you're hoping for like this project long term.
Yeah. So it started, Between Drinks is the name of the podcast, and it's about, craft spirits and the people and places that make them what they are. And so it's as much about those people and places as it is the drink. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that, people enjoy listening to it, that it's like a fun 30-minute break while they're doing the dishes or running or whatever. But that also you like come away with some like fun facts that you can like break out next time you're enjoying the drink at the bar, or just like a different level of appreciation and respect for these drinks, right? Like sake isn't just something you drink at a Japanese restaurant. Like there's this really cool history behind it. And, the serving methods reflect the culture there in a really cool way. And so that's kind of the hope there. And then, part of the reason too I started it selfishly was that it was like my own master's degree.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah, I used to run a tech podcast for ops people. And it was like, I realized that you can get so many people will say no if you ask to pick their brain over coffee, but if you ask them to be on a podcast, you can ask them whatever you want.
This is great advice for me too.
Yeah. And so I like talked to so many really impressive ops people for that podcast who like, amazing. Otherwise it would have been weird I would have felt weird reaching out to them. Yeah. So it gave me like an excuse. Man, I thought that podcast was hard, and now I like long for the days of the simplicity of a tech person who checks their email a million times a day and knows how to use a Calendly and a Zoom link and knows to not record a podcast in the middle of a busy cafe without headphones. Like, like spirits people are just a whole different breed. Yeah. But yeah, so I did the first season in Mexico specifically about non-agave spirits. So Mexican whiskey, aperitivos, craft beer, coffee. And then the second season is all about drinks in Japan. Ooh. So I spent a couple months in Japan, going to breweries and distilleries. And, I think if there's any place in the world that like you want to talk about craft beverages, it's this place that like defines what it means to have a craft, Yeah. And then I just got back from Scotland, which will be season 3. So, and I think that also just brought up some interesting like, we've talked a lot about being like a woman in a male-dominated industry.
That was my next question, so perfect.
Okay, yeah. It was about...
So I was like, I know you were able to like kind of carve out your niche of working with women in tech, but like that's not something you can really do in the alcohol industry. So I'm curious how you've managed that.
Yeah, I consciously try to make sure I'm interviewing a woman for every episode, and it's hard.
Oh.
And I have not succeeded in every episode.
Yeah.
And... Additionally, there has been this extra cultural level that I underestimated. Like, it sounds really obvious, but I think I got a little cocky in the sense that, like, yeah, we both traveled so much.
Yeah. But and you've also done this before.
Yeah.
It's not like your first time hosting.
No. I'm like, I've been, a podcaster before. I've, like, run my own projects like this before. I've traveled to these places before. I know, like, the beverages really well. I do my research. And I still really underestimated, like, for example, I think the Mexico season, I was like, yeah, I've lived here for 6 years. Like, I did not know how hard it was going to be. Like, the amount of WhatsApps and emails and Instagram messages to corral this stuff. And then language barrier, right? Yeah. Like, a lot of the people, rightly so, I don't want to limit myself to only people who speak English. But then Spanish is my non-native language. And so there's clips where I'm trying to transcribe the Spanish, first of all, because AI is shit at this. I don't care what they tell you. They're not there yet. Yeah, no. And I have to listen to myself in my, like, cringe Spanish, you know? And then, like, and ironically, I think Mexico was harder logistically, but easier culturally, maybe because I was, you know.
Because you've been here, you know the customs.
Yeah, but Japan was harder in a different way because there is so much, like, deference. And like niceties and polite and look, I knew to bring gifts. I brought gifts. I showed up on time. You know, like, I did all the things, but I'm also different in that culture because I'm trying to, like, meet the culture where it is. And so I'm more deferential and I'm more. Then there was one interview in particular where I was interviewing this guy and he just, like, came at me in a little bit of a way of, like, very in a normal tech bro way. Honestly, I was reflecting on this afterwards. Yeah. And I was like, it was kind of a, like, prove yourself energy. And, like, if it had been in the US, if this had been a tech pro in the US, I would have met him where he was and pushed back and also been a little, but I didn't feel like I could do that in this scenario. And so I felt like I just had to fold a little bit. Yeah. While, like, trying to still casually insert my knowledge and be like, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. In a way that I would not have done with another American. Yeah. Well, or Westerner even.
Well, I feel like even when you and I have gone out to the bars to drink, like, they're like, oh, look at these gringas. Like, here is mezcal. Do you know what mezcal is? And you're just like, oh my God. And I was like, this must be so, like, it's infuriating for me. And I'm not a mezcal sommelier. And I'm like, yes, I've lived here for 8 years. I know what mezcal is. But it's like, that must drive you insane. It does. You have to deal with it all the time.
And it's only recently that I've started to, like, let it go a little bit. Because I remember I was out with a friend, and we were at a bar. And he was bringing out tequila. And he was like, tequila can only be made in Jalisco. And because I asked where it was from, and he was like, Jalisco, it can only be made in Jalisco. And Ree looked at me, and she was like, please let it go.
She's like, don't do it.
And I was like, and I could not let it go. And I was like, actually, 95% of it is made in Jalisco, but it can actually be made in 4 states. And it was like explaining to a Mexican bartender, like, and like a guy. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm white-splaining. Like, but also you're wrong.
But also you're wrong. And it's like, I know this is your culture, but also you obviously haven't studied your agave spirits the way I have.
Yeah. So, like, and actually, so a related story, I was doing a mezcal tasting recently it was like a private tasting for, like, a birthday. And it was for a foreigner's birthday, but, like, the crowd was pretty mixed. It was a lot of Mexicans. And so I was there early. I had already set up. We were just, like, waiting for everyone. And someone made a comment, a Mexican guy made this comment about, who's leading the mezcal tasting? I hope it's not one of these gringos. And he wasn't talking to me, so I didn't answer. And I just kind of was like, okay, whatever. That's the energy we're going to be bringing into this tasting. But you know what? So often, those are the people who are the most engaged during the tasting. And so there was a little bit of, like...
Because they want to know.
Yeah. And so there was... And it wasn't, I wouldn't say rude. Some of his, like, initial questions were a little, like, prove yourself, you know? Yeah. But I, like, very quickly did. And he was the most engaged. He had so many questions. And then afterwards, he could not stop talking about how great the tasting was and how much he learned and how much he enjoyed it. And I was just like, yeah. Like, because if you are a white woman mezcal sommelier in Mexico City, you have to know 5 times as much. And that I don't mind versus when I was a programmer, like a female programmer in the US, being told that I had to know twice as much as the man beside me. That was offensive and infuriating. In Mexico, because it's cultural, and because it's like the national spirit of Mexico, and I'm not Mexican, and there are so many white people trying to exploit mezcal spirits right now.
100%.
I'm very happy taking that on. Yeah. But I think it's been an interesting...
That is very interesting.
I don't know if dichotomy is the right word. It's just like, yeah, it's been an interesting contrast because it's like, oh, I do see this parallel, but in this circumstance, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting because it's cultural and it's not, Oh, that's really interesting. I never really thought about it like that. I feel like at this point, I would just be like, starting every tasting, I'm just like, I understand. Like, I am a white girl from the U.S. here to teach you about mezcal. So let me explain why I am the person doing this.
Yeah.
And just be like, that's why I came here, was to study this and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? I feel like at this point, I would just lead off with that because it's like, you see me.
I do kind of name that in some way, shape, or form every time. And then I think pretty quickly, just because of the way that I structure my tastings, they're super nerdy. Yeah. Like, I think people get it pretty quickly. Like, oh, she does know what she's talking about. Especially if I have any other nerds there who are asking questions. Like, you know, rarely do people totally stump me. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so it's like, okay, cool. You know, and we'll look it up if I don't know.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
So.
Oh, well, I love that.
Yeah.
And how do you feel now that you've kind of changed direction? Like, how do you feel personally about this shift? Do you feel more fulfilled? Do you feel proud of yourself for taking this leap? Like, how has that been for you?
Man, you have to ask every day. It's a different answer. Because it's like, I'm still in the thick of it, you know? Like, I don't feel like I've like come out on the other side as like, oh, now it's a huge success and it's all worked out. Like, I'm still very much in the figuring it out phase. Yeah. And so, like, you know, in general, I'm proud of myself, but also I'm like a huge ball of anxiety and feelings and, you know, an overwhelming to-do list. And like, I think too, I keep feeling like I'm back in my like early 20s where you did all the things and you threw everything up the wall to see what stuck. Yeah. And now I'm like, I have so many like projects and things because I'm like, I don't know what's going to work or what's going to make sense. So I love the work that I'm doing, but also the workload and the amount of money I'm making right now is not sustainable. Yeah. To be like really frank. And so it's like, okay, we're still in it. Yeah. You're still figuring it out. Yeah. But it's exciting now. Oh, it's so exciting that she's dying now.
So exciting.
Please don't die. So exciting. Mostly it's exciting. Yeah. But sometimes that excitement goes into like full terror.
But I feel like you still have so many projects that like you have options. Yeah. Which is amazing. Do you want to talk about the newer projects? Yeah. Like your travel projects?
Sure. So
coming to light?
Yeah. So the big thing that I'm launching soon is Between Drinks trips. So I have a fair amount of people who, you know, watch me go to Scotland, go to Japan every year, do all these trips, sit at these bars, have these funny anecdotes on my newsletter. And they're like, oh, I want to come with you. And it's like, okay, well, now you can. Yeah, I love that. So the first trip will be Japan. I love Japan. It's like my home away from home. And this will be like my fifth trip. I've now spent 6-7 months there total, and have like been lucky enough to see a lot of different parts of Japan. And I really love, there's some places I love that are kind of more off the beaten path that I think a lot of tourists don't make it to for various reasons. And like I said, it's the place that like defines what it means to have a craft, you know? And so I also think singularly, like Japan, you can tell the history of Japan through its drinks, through sake, shoju, whiskey, awamori. And so I've designed this really cool trip for people who, you know, whether it's your first time, it'll really like add on to like a Tokyo, Osaka, you know, Golden Triangle trip, or whether you want to go back and go deeper. We're going to do some of these like smaller cities you probably wouldn't have went to on your own that I've spent a lot of time in, where I built these relationships with these distillers and brewers who are not normally open for tours and tastings. And so, yeah, it's going to be
it's amazing.
Like a 10-day trip in the spring is when I'm doing the pilot. And then hopefully we'll do it again next fall.
Ooh, and so do you plan on doing Japan every year or switching it up?
Yeah, I would love to do Japan every year. Okay. It's also selfishly a great way to make I go to Japan every year for like 2 months, and I need a business excuse to go.
Yeah, there you go. A write-off.
Yeah. I need some justification for those expensive flights. And so, yeah, the idea being that the podcast is kind of the way that I see them fitting together is that the podcast is like the scouting trip. And I think sometimes I'll do a season where, okay, maybe this doesn't make sense to turn into a trip, but the places where, so I think hopefully Scotland will be the second one. Ooh. Because I think the thing that Japan and Scotland have in common are those are both places that are like bucket list locations for people. Yeah. they have multiple points of interest. It's not just like one or two cities you want to go to. Like they have a lot of stuff in them, and they have infrastructure to make it pretty easy to get around, and great drinks, right? And a really cool history associated with them. And so for people who like, but also logistically, it can be hard to figure out.
Yeah.
In Japan, it's like a lot of places aren't open to the public, and in Scotland, they're kind of far flung, and it's hard to kind of piece together. It's a lot of logistics.
Yeah.
Especially if you only have a little amount of time. And so the idea being like, okay, the podcast seasons will be scouting trips, and then if, you know, it's really cool and I think people would like it and it fits these other criteria, maybe we'll make a trip out of it.
I love that.
So vamos a ver. We'll see if we can make it work.
And you have a way to help people get their own points too.
Yes, I do.
That's why I was saying I have so many things.
I have so many things, yeah. So yeah, everything is kind of like drinks, travel, hospitality. So
it's nicely under an umbrella.
Yeah. So obviously I do all this travel, and people are like, "Oh, you must be rolling in it," and I'm like, "No, actually, I have made very little money for the past couple of years." And the way that I do it is, especially my flights, is with points. And so me and two friends who have spent a lot of time helping other people use their points and explaining how it works and how to use the system without killing your credit and whatever, put together a course called Point School. And the idea is that it is like a little crash course in, you know, how points and miles work, how to use them efficiently, and then how to find deals specifically in points and miles. So, you know, like last time I went to Japan, I flew back. It was a $12,000 first class ANA flight, like caviar, $400 whiskey, lay flat seat. I had a living room and a bedroom. Like,
what?
And I got it for $1,200 worth of points.
Damn.
You know, like, so there are really good deals out there. And I think as much as I like want people to take the course and like fly better, there also is this level of like, I think sometimes we see all these people flying fancy on Instagram, and we're like, oh, how much work is that? Is it really worth it? And it's like, cool, we'll explain the amount of work involved. I think it's worth it. I don't think it's actually that much. But also we've structured it in a way that's like, here's like the minimum. At minimum, do X, Y, Z. And then like, if you want to get more intense about it, here's like the scaffolding. But it's like, but afterwards, if you have spent 2 hours going through this course and you're like, okay, a lot of that, it's not worth it to me. Cool, now you know. And every time you see one of those Instagram posts, you can be like, I know what you had to do to get that, and it's not worth it to me.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like less FOMO on your feed too.
It's like, or I know you didn't pay millions of dollars for that.
Exactly, 100%. So really I just want people to like take better trips and experience the place that they're in a little bit differently. And I think that's kind of that overlap between Point School and between drinks.
Yeah, and I feel like you could definitely tie that into between drinks trips. Like, and if you want to get there with points and not pay for your
100%.
tickets,
everyone who signed up for the Japan trip already is like, how do I get my flights? I was just talking to someone about this yesterday, and I was like, okay, here, I'm going to help you. We're going to figure it out. Like, you're not paying full price for shitty economy seats to Japan, I promise.
Yeah, they tie in nicely together. I love it. So how can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and all of your programs and events that you have to offer?
So I'm Caroline Syrup in most places. Instagram is where I'm most active, Caroline Syrup. And then carolinesyrup.com is my website, and that has very prominent links to betweendrinks.co, which is where the podcast is, and Point School as well. So that's where I have my newsletter, and it's all the things. So really, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll keep you on the loop and send you crazy bar stories from my far-flung travels.
Yes, we love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I loved it.
Could talk to you all day.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, my dear. Thank you, everyone, for listening. See you next time. Ciao.